Dr. Joseph Fair. He joins me now on set. Thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely.
This is alarming for some people. This is New York City's mayor. New York is what many people consider, a capital city here in the U.S. It's a major city in the United States.
Economic capital.
Yes, for sure. I mean, Wall Street is here, and we saw what happened on Wall Street today. The mayor using the term state of emergency. I know that is a financial term, but people hear the word emergency, and it strikes a little bit of a panic.
And it rightfully so. Whenever you hear the word emergency, you should. But first and foremost, it is what you said. It is a financial measure. That means the federal government will now be able to reimburse the city for costs that it has not planned into its annual budget for the rapid upsurge in both care and testing and everything else that's going to be required to mitigate the effects of the pandemic. Secondly, declaring an emergency also convinces, that percentage of people that aren't taking this seriously that they need to take this seriously. This is not a joke. This is not a hoax. Even if you yourself are healthy and you may be fine, you risk infecting people that are not going to be fine. So everyone has to be on the same page, and declaring a state of emergency helps get everyone on the same page.
For people who this week are still wondering how serious this is and should I take this seriously, you start to hear things like Broadway is going dark. New York City declaring a state of emergency. Baseball is not going to start on time. Opening day is going to be at least delayed 2 weeks. March Madness has been canceled. Hockey is suspended. I mean, we're not going to have any major pro sports playing right now. The biggest college basketball championship is not going to be happening. And people start to think, wow, large gatherings are not a great idea. And people are taking some serious measures. How important is it to do that right now, to contain things, perhaps for a short period of time even?
Absolutely essential. In fact, we're looking at a level of shutdown that we probably haven't seen since 9/11, and that was just the airline industry.
Right.
So shutting down mostly everything that's going to contribute to spreading the pandemic, mass gatherings, places where people come to a lot, any non-essential services, hospitals, pharmacies, those things will stay open. Groceries, they'll stay open because we have to keep them open. Otherwise, we're looking at pretty much a shutdown of everything else.
People start to get nervous and think, okay, well, if I shouldn't be in large gatherings, should I be in gatherings with a couple of hundred people, going to work, getting on the subway, all of these types of things that are parts of daily life, particularly for New Yorkers? It's hard to get around without seeing people, even though the city is quiet. What do you say to people who think, okay, fine, I won't go to a baseball game and I won't go to the theater, but what about all those other things?
Protect yourself as best you can, because it's not going to be feasible for everyone to avoid, like, for example, the subway, at least at this point in time.
Right.
And it may become a measure where eventually that it's even shut down, but we're not there yet. But protect yourself. Religiously wash your hands. Keep your surfaces clean, work desk, etc., phone, especially tablets, things like that. If you're going to be on the subway, make sure you're not directly touching the rail, because you don't know who's touched it before you if they had COVID-19. It's a time for, frankly, I'm not a big fan of public shaming, and we aren't in general as a culture. But if someone coughs without covering their mouths, now's the time to actually say something to them and, call them out on that.
Those people are getting the side eye like you wouldn't believe on the subway these days. The mayor addressing some concerns that a lot of people have, and I'd love to talk a little bit more about the financial piece of this, because we were discussing this while he was talking. But, addressing things like trying to get legal help for people who can't pay their rent, saying that this is something that they have to at least acknowledge could go on for 6 months or more. And that's going to affect people's ability to go to work. The mayor saying that they're actually trying to let 10% of city workers work from home. That's some 35,000 people. There are people watching this who are thinking, what am I going to do if they shut things down? How are we going to make ends meet? How are businesses going to run? But you brought up a great point to me off air that perhaps a short-term shutdown could prevent this from getting much worse economically long term. Yeah,
absolutely. If we don't think about those types of options now, we're going to pay a lot more than we would if we think about them later and try to implement it later once it's spread even further than it already has. And going back to the testing, we don't even know how far it's spread by now. We just know that most states have it. The states that don't have it likely have it and just don't know about it yet, just because they probably don't have the testing up and running. And even the testing we have up and running, it's still hard to get that. We're only prioritizing those in critical condition and frontline healthcare workers.
Mayor de Blasio, a Democrat, of course, expressing his support for the House Democrats' plan to try to get a relief package together. I mean, we are looking at what the United States, $8 billion. The president had initially asked for $2.5 billion. Now we're up in the $8 billion range. How does that compare to how other countries are fighting this outbreak and the kind of money that they're putting forward to control the what's now a pandemic?
Yeah, but by comparison, Italy just announced a $28 billion package because of their economic losses and recovery from what they're experiencing right now. So 8.1 billion, you can imagine, is not even going to begin to cover what we're going to need eventually to contain this virus and pandemic.
It's interesting to see. I mean, just last night, President Trump started talking about a travel ban, folks coming here from Europe, and you really started to see today. I mean, we saw some shots earlier today of Times Square looking quieter than it has been in a long time. Yeah. People saying, you know, coming to work, the subways haven't been as crowded. Yep. This seems like this is just the beginning of what could be quite a trickle-down effect of fewer tourists, fewer people out and about, not just in New York, but throughout the country.
Absolutely. And, you know, I was watching scenes from Italy earlier today where people that were out and, you know, a guy coming home from work was just stopping to snap a photo. He was actually fined. They said arrested and fined, but I'm pretty sure he was just fined.
Yes, he was fined.
So. But, you know, we're going to see more of that because we have to enforce social distancing at this point in time. It is a huge inconvenience. It is going to cost a lot of money. And unless a federal and national declaration of emergency or a national security emergency is declared, we can't do that nationally. Just like we saw with post-Katrina, a lot of people would not have survived without FEMA issuing those cash and credit cards, et cetera, to help them get along, to pay those rents and to pay their bills. And we're going to have to see that to get through this.
Dr. Fair, I have to thank you so much for spending time for us because I know you are in demand today. You have several news appearances to make. Thanks for hanging with us and talking everybody through this. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
And right now, Congress and the White House are negotiating an emergency coronavirus aid package.
It's about putting people and families first. So, I mean, everybody could have a complaint about this or that. I said, save it for another day. We can have an after-action review about how we got into this situation. Save it for another day. Right now, we have to find our common ground, work together to get this done as soon as possible.
And NBC News correspondent Anne Caldwell joins me now from Capitol Hill. And Leanne, they have been negotiating throughout the day. Where are we tonight?
Yeah, it seems like these negotiations are coming closer to an end, but we don't have that. They haven't reached the finish line just yet. We just got word that House Speaker Nancy Pelosi just had another phone call with Treasury Secretary Mnuchin, who is the main negotiator in these talks as far as the White House is concerned. You know, optimism up here on Capitol Hill seems to be growing a little bit that the House is actually able to pass something with the support of the White House, because, of course, that's crucial. If House Democrats pass a bill, then it's going nowhere in the Senate, and the president's not going to sign it. So, that, you know, a Democratic partisan bill will mean nothing up here. But if they can get something over that finish line with the support of the White House, then it has some good momentum heading over into the Senate, and perhaps they can move something quite quickly, Allison.
Yeah, Leanne, that's kind of unique, something that you mentioned there, that Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin is involved in this process, because anyone who follows politics or follows how bills typically go, House, Senate, and then to the White House, but to have a representative from the White House involved from the beginning sort of gives the sense that they are trying at least not to waste time here.
Yeah, that's right. They, you know, the way the place works around here in the age of the president is the president, under this president anyway, is Republicans don't really do a lot unless they have the sign off from the president. And so that's why it was so necessary for Mnuchin to be involved in these negotiations. And Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has admittedly taken a step back and said they'll work it out. And if they get sign off from all parties, then we'll come over and pass it here. But there's always one problem and a caveat, Allison, and that is the president hasn't said anything specifically about it yet. And we know the president can go rogue and go in the exact opposite direction from what his own administration, what his own aides are doing. And so there's always nervousness, even if there is sign off from Mnuchin and the administration officials, that the president might not ultimately support it. And if that doesn't happen, then things are a problem, Allison.
For sure. That's an understatement, Leanne. We know that this bill was originally drafted by the Democrats. I know that it will likely change form before everybody joins in, but at least as far as you know, could you tell us what's in it, what we think, kind of the meat of it is, and perhaps where Democrats and Republicans are having some trouble seeing eye to eye on it?
Yeah, the meat of the bill is paid leave for people who can't go to work because they are either quarantined or infected with the coronavirus. So that's the bulk of the bill. There's also expanded aid or food aid so an expansion of welfare, aid or food for children who usually get school lunch but perhaps might be out of school because their schools are closed, an extension of unemployment insurance, and also free testing for coronavirus for anyone so that the cost is not a barrier for people from going to get tested. So what's interesting is the sticking points between the White House and the administration. The big one is this paid leave program. The White House and Republicans are very concerned that this is going to become another government mandate that continues beyond coronavirus, and they want to ensure that that is not the case. But I will also say the good news is that they are negotiating in the confines of the bill. From what I'm told, the White House is not trying to throw new things into it. We heard the president's address just last night where he laid out a bunch of proposals like small business loans, a payroll tax cut, things that he wanted. The White House is not trying to insert those things in this bill at this time. So it does make those negotiations a little bit smaller, a little bit narrower, and perhaps a little bit more feasible. Allison.
All right, Leanne, we will hope that they can reach an agreement there. We know a lot of people are depending on that help. Leanne Caldwell on Capitol Hill, thank you so much.